Hello all, here's a guide on how I'm playing Chayula Monk. We're prioritising Mana Leech because we're building around Consuming Questions and Ravenous Doubt. Ravenous Doubt gives us instant Mana Leech, super nice. Consuming Questions lets us leech Energy Shield at the cost of losing our Energy Shield recharge. Tendency, I've gone for Chayula's Gift. It's a really nice defensive layer, doubling our Chaos resistance and giving us a plus 10 to our maximum resistances. The fourth one I'm going to go for is Reality Rending, just for a nice damage buff. If you don't like Chayula's Gift and Reality Rending, that's fine. You can sort of go down the Wake and Dream and Lucid Dreaming path if you prefer, which is more of an active defensive and offensive layer, but you need to be sort of picking up flames as you go along, and I don't really like that myself. I don't really recommend going down to Embrace the Darkness. I think losing all of our spirit is just too much of a hit, so I've sort of ignored the bottom half of this tree. While leveling, you want to go this direction, get up the Mindful Awareness for the Evasion Energy Shield. We're stacking Evasion Energy Shield, so that's what we need. Dex int, movement speed, is always nice. We're primarily working on freeze damage, so you want to pass through some frozen nodes or freeze damage, cold damage nodes. So this is the direction we take to start with. You more or less want to ignore the top half of this tree while you're leveling. You go down this path, you want to pick up blinding strikes, really nice damage and blinds the enemies. You could probably ignore subterfuge mask until you've got a decent energy shield base equipped helmet, which might not be till late game, so you can ignore them 3 nodes. You definitely want Snowpiercer. You're doing pure cold damage most of the time, and intelligence is also nice. So just being able to penetrate some cold resistance is super useful for us. After that, you could either sort of head up to the Quarterstaff's abilities. These are all just really solid nodes, or you can go down here to Falcon Technique first, which is increased attack speed per 15 dexterity. It's super strong. We also want these dexterity nodes and some extra evasion and dexterity based nodes here. After that, you can go down and get some more offensive abilities. So reach and strike for melee strike range, really nice. All these are damage nodes along the way, and then we've got some attack speed ones here, which I'll probably fill them all out once I'm max level. We're using Herald of Ice and Herald of Ash, so having coming Calamity with 50% increased cold damage while affected by Herald of Ice. And once you've sort of filled out the bottom half of this tree, if you need Leech, you definitely want to get Siphon, and recover 2% of mana on kill is super powerful as well. It just shoots your mana back up when you're killing groups of big mobs. If you're struggling with mana cost, you can go up here as well and get Conservative Casting, 8% reduced mana cost of skills, bit of mana regen, cover a bit of mana while you're running to the next pack, and then start leeching again, kind of thing. These are really nice. Killer Instinct, attack damage while on full life. Since we're leeching Energy Shield, we are pretty much always on full life unless we've taken a big hit recently, so that's pretty much a flat 30% increased attack damage buff. After that, you want to focus a bit more on the defensive layers, I'd say. You want the evasion nodes, +1 to maximum energy shield per 12 evasion rating on equipped body armor, so you need a high base evasion rating on our body armor to take advantage of that properly. So it's worth noting that if you don't have decent evasion rating on your body armor, you can skip this node for now. Another defensive sort of circle is up here, just energy shield, evasion rating is all good, and then a bigger variant of it. This is more of an offensive one, and it also reduces our attack skill. So if you're still struggling with mana after picking up the mana leeching nodes that I've gone over, then this is really useful, as well as conservative casting. Since we're leeching our energy shield, we have also picked up Eternal Youth. My life recovery from Flask applies to energy shield instead, which we're mostly sort of hiding behind a defensive layer of energy shield. So just having a super fast life recharge and being able to apply our health pots to our energy shield super strong for our build. It's great, love it. For Jules, you primarily want damage with Quarterstaffs, elemental damage, or Mana Leech. Mana Leech being the most important one because we are Mana Leech focused. After that, you want either elemental damage or damage with Quarterstaffs, and as a fourth, you could go for attack speed. Getting all 4 is going to be expensive, so it's more of a chase item, but more importantly, you want that Mana Leech on there. Another note, I forgot to mention, Thin Ice and Heavy Frost, super powerful nodes. Ignore non-negative elemental resistance of frozen enemies. We're constantly basically one-tap freezing all of our enemies, so that's basically 0 resistances on everything we hit. And then 50% increased damage against frozen enemies, super strong because we're doing mostly frozen damage. Now there is a couple more Mana Leech nodes that I don't actually have because I've got quite a lot of my gear now, so I've managed to respec out of them. But if you're struggling with Mana Leech, there are a few nodes you can get. So there's Immortal Thirst, it's very nice, 25% increased Mana Leech. There's also 10% increased Mana Leech on the way, and you get 1% recovery of life on kill on the way. So it's a pretty solid path to that Mana Leech. There is also Siphon, which I believe we touched on earlier, so I won't really go on again. And then we've got Manifold Method, which is a huge amount, 50% increased amount of Mana Leech, and 25% increased chance to inflict ailments against rare or enemies. Now we're constantly inflicting frost, so that's another benefit for us. and it passed through 2 attack damage nodes to get there. So it's a pretty nice path, and it's a huge benefit for us. And lastly, I have allocates diffusion on my amulet, which is 30% increased amount of mana leech and unaffected by chill while leeching mana. The second one is nice, but not what we're really going for. The main thing being 30% increased amount of mana leech. So you can also get that annoying if you are still struggling for leech after picking up all the nodes. It really depends on how much you have on your items. That's the passives done. Let's move on to gear. I'm going to start by saying my gear is pretty decent at the moment, but this is the build I've been playing since the start of campaign. I've leveled up all the way through campaign and got to my current point with this build. It's had much worse gear a lot of my progression throughout the game, but it's pretty decent now. So I don't want you to be put off by the fact that my gear is at least semi-decent. It can be done with more starter gear, but let's get on to it anyway. So the main thing we're doing is mana leeching. There are 4 pieces of gear that you can get mana leech on in PoE2 currently, one of them being a weapon. So we've got 8.45% mana leech there. That's a huge amount of mana leech. Don't really even worry about getting that kind of number. Having any on your weapon at all is pretty much all you need. You just need some of that base stat on your weapon to keep stacking up with your other nodes and whatnot. Secondly, you can get it on rings. So I've got 2 rings with 7 and 6.5%. You can also quality physical modifiers for an increased 20% bigger stat on the leech. I haven't got around to doing it because these are actually new magic find rings. I was using some normal rings that were fully qualified, but I've sort of swapped to a magic find build now. The 4th piece being gloves. You can get leech on gloves. So yeah, so the 4 pieces, we've got weapon, 2 rings and gloves. That's basically where you're going to be stacking all your leech. It's important to get what you can on where you can. That's the leech covered. Other than the leech, we basically want high fizz damage. All of our skills, or most of our skills, convert from physical DPS. So I'll go over this a bit more when we sort of cover the skill side, but you can see there it says converts 80% of physical damage to cold. So we've got a super high fizz weapon, we've got mana leech on it, and ideally, if I wanted sort of a better weapon than what I've got now, I would additionally on top of what I've currently got with the high damage and the leech, I would go for attack speed and plus the skill gems, and then potentially either crit damage or crit bonus. Other than that, for body armor, we want the highest evasion rate in base we possibly can, because we've got one of our passive trees that we touched on earlier that scales our energy shield based on the evasion rating from our armor piece. And similarly, we want a high energy shield helmet because we have a passive which gives us 2 evasion rating per 1 maximum energy shield on our helmet. So the more energy shield to get, the more evasion rating we're getting on top of it. We're trying to sort of stack our stats that way. The more evasion rating we get there, the more energy shield we get on our body armor, and then for our helmet, the more energy shield we have on the base, the more evasion rating it gives us as a bonus. Boots, we don't really need anything important. You just want to go for high movement speed and then fill out the resistances that you're lacking. I've also gone for rarity because, like I said, I've just recently sort of swapped over to a magic find build. It's been a lot of fun. Again, belt, not super important. Fill out the stats you're missing, so resistances, life, energy shield, and then charm slot if you can. Amulet, it's more just padding out the stats you don't have, so I've gone for quite a defensive amulet with the evasion and energy shield, and then I was also tinkering with a crit chance build, which is why I've still got this one on, because I was doing sort of rare crit. I've moved out of the crit now, but I'm keeping the rarity on and I haven't replaced it yet. But you can either go offensive or defensive on your amulet. You can sort of get attack speed, crit, flat damage, or evasion rating, energy shields, etc. It depends on what you feel like your build is lacking the most. That's a gear. So if we move on to our skills now. Our main skills are Ice Strike, Tempest Spell, and Shattering Palm. We open with Shattering Palm. It coats all of the nearby mobs with little ice helmets that explode on death, which synergizes a lot with Herald of Ice. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Ice Strike is our most used skill. We spam it on every mob until they die. Tempest Spell being used less frequently, but more of a heavy hitter, and we utilize Tempest Spell for our mana leech because it doesn't convert our damage to an element, so we can take full advantage of the damage type being physical on impact, which means we get a crap ton of mana leech and energy shield leech, which is basically the survivability of our build. It also does a boatload of damage, so though Ice Strike is our main skill, with Shattering Palm sort of being the opener, Tempest Spell is the oh crap button. We whack it down, everything explodes, our energy shield and mana shoot back up. You can see my planner below for a list of all the supports we're using and sort of the correct order to get them in. I just want to go over some of the mana leech mechanics with Ice Strike. You can see it cost me 42 mana there. If we go down here, it's 45 because of the mana multipliers, 120% on 2 of these gems. Now, that's quite a small amount of mana cost for the actual skill and the level, with it being level 19. That's because of the reduced mana cost nodes we've got. So we've got no, that one, which is 8% reduced mana cost, and that one, which is 10% reduced cost of skills. That brings the mana more in line to something that we can sort of reliably leech. So with Ice Strike, you can see I've currently got 82.72% mana leech. That is about where you need to be honest, to make it viable. If you're struggling to hit them numbers, you can also replace one of the gems with Soul Thief, which is an additional 5%, similar to how it is on gear, so it scales up with your passive tree nodes. It keeps our mana up, so we don't need to constantly be mana potting. We can just sort of run around, Ice Strike the mobs, and have a pretty decent recovery of mana. If you are struggling with mana, you can actually downgrade the level a few levels. So if you go down to say level 17, and then you can change your gems around to either remove or add some of the more cost multiplier gems. So if you use less cost multipliers and higher up level your gem, or or use more of these and use a lower level, it's worth experimenting, because I did find that using a level 15 Ice Strike with the better gems in actually gave me more of a damage boost than, say, a level 18 Ice Strike with the worst gems in. And that was sort of the experimenting I was doing when I was struggling to have a viable amount of mana cost to keep up with the mana leech I was actually doing with Ice Strike, because like I say, it's quite minimal. It's 20% from the physical end of Ice Strike. The most of our mana leech comes from the Temper spell when we whack that down. Other than that, we've got Frozen Locust. It's quite a nice defensive ability. It makes us jump backwards, so it's a little bit quicker than dodge rolling. So if I'm trying to dodge roll, I'm sort of stuck in that, but you can do that. Gets you out of circles pretty quickly, and if an enemy walks into the ice crystal, it explodes and freezes everything around it, more or less. So it's a nice defensive ability, but it also supplements our damage because it gets the freeze going, and then we can go and explode the mobs a bit quicker. Wind Blast is not something we use very often, but it's a pure physical damage attack, so it gives us a lot of leech. It pushes the enemies back, and we don't need a combo to use it like the bell. So primarily we use the bell for our mana leech, but if we don't have the combo up of the 4 combo on it, we can't do it. And if we're in a tight situation, we need some leech, then it's a really nice defensive ability / recover your leech. Just give yourself a second to breathe from everything that's going on. Quite nice. Pure physical again, it's what we need our leech, because all leech in the game right now is based off physical attack damage. So we have to sort of take advantage of that. Lastly, we've got our auras, Herald of Ice being the most important one. Any enemies that are frozen, when we kill them, they shatter and deal AoE damage to all the enemies around. That works really nicely with Shattering Palm. As I mentioned earlier, we open with the Shattering Palm, and that gives all the enemies in a range a little ice helmet that explodes on death too. So that plus Herald of Ice means we've got double explosions going on. We're doing a lot of overkill damage, so I've actually added on Herald of Ash, which gives us an extra 17% of overkill damage on our explosions. So you'll see in the build showcase coming up that we're exploding a load of ice and fire damage constantly. We've got Ghost Dance, which is purely survivability, stacking energy shield quite a lot, and also evasion rating. You can see we've got 79% evasion, 10.8k evasion rating. So whenever we are hit, we consume a Ghost Shroud. It's a little buff. You see I've got 4 right now. They come back over time quite quickly. It consumes one of them to give us 5% of our evasion as energy shield. So it's basically just a little energy shield heal whenever we do get hit. Wind Dancer gives us a bunch more evasion. So if I turn it off, you can see we go down to 69, but if I bring it back on, it is a timed thing. So you see I've got 1 stack, 2 stack, 3 stack. It stops at 3. I'm up to 79 now. What this does is when you actually hit, it gives a big air explosion out, pushes the enemies back, and then we've got lockdown and pin support. So it actually immobilizes the enemies. It does push back. It pushes them back and pins them to the area they're in. Gives us a bit of time to react if we need it, mostly for the evasion, but the gale force that it triggers is also kind of nice. And then Herald of Ash we touched on. It's just to help our explosions go boom a bit quicker. If you don't quite have the spirit, I've got a bit of extra on my body armor, which allows me to have the extra auras in. I would remove either Wind Dancer or Herald of Ash, depending on whether you need more defense or more damage. So if you need more damage, then keep Herald of Ash, get rid of Wind Dancer, and vice versa if you need more defense. And that's the end of my build, my thought process. It's all done completely by myself. I've tried to approach PoE2 blindly, not been reading guides, watching other people playing much. It's just what I figured out through playing. Probably not optimal, probably not an amazing build, but it's been a lot of fun and I've enjoyed it. Yeah, like and subscribe, though I don't really care, so whatever. And here's some gameplay of my build just so you can see it in action. Thanks, bye.